So I've been doing these videos on how to survive in the city, and the last one I did, more of the suburbs type city scenario. One guy left a comment. I think it was only one or two people who left a comment saying, "Hey, Zach, that really wasn't a lot about the suburbs. Can you do something else about suburbs?" And so I'm like, okay, here, you're right. You're actually right. I did not go out to what I would do and then what other people may have to do. Okay, that's the difference. So let's just go ahead and jump into the suburbs, and I'm going to make some recommendations here. Like, you're living in a suburb, okay, and there's no chance of you taking over an office building or doing something like, you don't have a few friends who are switched on and ready to go, all gung ho, and maybe there's some rule of law remaining, so that would prevent you to do that anyway, but. Like a Hurricane Katrina type situation where you've got roving bands of people who are looting and they are breaking into houses and there's crime and the response time for law enforcement is dismal at best. Something like that after a hurricane. I mean, I lived through Hurricane Charlie. There were definitely problems. I mean, I got me and my late wife Jamie were driving down the road one day and this sheriff officer pulled us over in Orlando when I lived I was going to college there, and he was not happy at all that I was on the road. He was very insistent that I get off the road. They were really trying to patrol the roads right after the hurricane, but I had to go somewhere and she went with me. And anyway, that sort of scenario where you have got to defend your suburb, your neighborhood. Let's jump into it. We're going to go, again, back to St. Louis because this is the town I know, and I'm actually going to pick the subdivision that I grew up in. My family is out of there now. They're moved, but I figured out let's just go back to the subdivision that I lived in, and we'll talk about it and what I would do because I thought about it. Even back then, I had a preparedness mindset because there was a time where I lived in an apartment, and I'm like, I'm not going to stay here if it hits the fan. Okay, I was newly married, and we were living in an apartment, and I'm like, I'm not staying here. I'm going to go back there because that's more defendable. Let's talk about why. Let's get into it. So behold, the neighborhood that I grew up in. This is South St. Louis County, and this is a subdivision. It was more of a middle class to upper middle class subdivision area where people live. There's a golf course nearby. Interesting fact, this is designed by Hale Irwin. I actually got to meet Hale Irwin when I was a kid because as a kid, I grew up and I'd go over to this golf course and I would pick up golf balls and sell them back to the golfers. I actually met John Madden too. John Madden would play this golf course, and I met him one time over at the clubhouse, which is right here. I was sitting down eating nachos from the money I had just earned by selling golf balls back to golfers, and I sat down to eat my nachos at the little clubhouse thing, and sat down next to me was John Madden, so that was kind of cool. Anyway, this is the area we're looking at, and this subdivision, now it doesn't matter really what subdivision you're in. Here's the deal about subdivisions. Subdivisions and neighborhoods like this are like towns within a towns. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. You've got like a town here and you've got like a town here. Those could all be towns. And then you have larger subdivisions. You may have bigger subdivisions like, let me see if, look at some of these. Like, do you see how this could be a town within a town within a town? You've got like a town here, like on this cul-de-sac area right there. You've got a town here. So a little villages if you may. So think of it in terms like that. How will your immediate town, like this is a really nice cul-de-sac, you could make that one big town. This was actually, they used to call this Plat 3. There's two plats to this subdivision, and there's one here, and then one here. And that's how the subdivision was divided. Now, there's lots of issues with subdivisions. Normally, you're going to have an HOA that you're probably going to have to deal with, and whatever Karen is running that HOA is probably going to take control at the downfall of society and try to enact her or his, because there can be guy Karens too, especially in this world we live in. Don't get me into that. I'll get banned by YouTube. Anyway, whenever Karen is involved in your HOA is probably going to try to enact some sort of control, but they are probably, because they're a Karen, they're not going to have the mental fortitude or the intestinal fortitude to actually do what needs to be done. So in quick order, most of those Karens are going to be dealt with, and I've done videos before on that in the past. Karens will be dealt with, especially HOA Karens that are intolerable, will be dealt with pretty much quick and fast order. But something like this, you develop a system. of township in a neighborhood like this, where you get a number of switched on people who know that the issue is happening. And you have seen this in places like Hurricane Katrina, where they basically put up roadblocks right at the entrance. You quickly cut off those most likely avenue of approaches. And a subdivision like this has one avenue of approach. I don't know about yours. Yours may have multiple ones. And if you have multiple ones, then you're going to have to deal with that. But you've got one entrance right here. Even these homes back here, which are larger homes that belong to more well-off people, they can only get through by this. They would come up this way. There's a gate right there. They would go back into these housing areas. But there's no other way to get in here. And so maybe there is one over here. I guess you can come up this way. And I just noticed that. That must be new addition since I moved out. Anyway, my point being, you have to shut off the avenues of approach. And putting a gate guard here, a gate manned on the hour by people within the community who have comms, who have radios, who can notify a quick reaction force, so to speak, of someone who, if they need reinforcements. So if someone in the middle of the night comes charging through here with their truck because they want access to some goods or they want to rape and pillage and do bad things, you need to be able to call other people who can quickly come down from the homes and help defend their subdivision. That would be the ideal setup. You're going to have to stop and shut off the avenues of approach to your homestead. When you have a homestead subdivision. When you have a subdivision like this and you're trying to provide security, you also want to take into account areas that are nearby. Like you've got lots of growing area here. You can, set up farms and set up gardens and all kinds of things to be able to grow food for this community who is now trying to be protected. Someone who is a benevolent dictator-ish could set up some sort of command and control structure, or you could keep it, in a democracy or a representative republic where you have people voting. You got to be careful with democracies, because democracies, all the wolves can vote on eating the sheep for lunch, and that's a bad thing. Like, for instance, if someone here is well prepped and someone here is well prepped and someone here is well prepped, and you as a community vote to take all that stuff and divide it up amongst everyone else, welcome to democracy. So it might behoove you to play down that you are the prepper. It's like that we did that Burbs thumbnail in the last video, and in that movie who was the prepper. In a grid down situation, the rest of the community will take everything they have from those people and divide it up amongst those who don't. And if you don't decide to play along, well, you're just going to get, a bullet in your back one day. So just know all that and proceed, with caution. The other thing, take into account some of your surroundings. I used to play these online video games where you would go out and you would kind of farm other communities and take from them. And I'm not suggesting at all, doing that, because that would be illegal, but and just wrong. But however, right nearby here, let me show you. Oh, right here. This was Susan Park, and these are stocked fish ponds, and these are barns with animals, roosters. There's some pigs in here. There's ducks. There's sheep. There's goats. There's turkeys in some of these barns. Horses, even. Now, I'm not going to eat a horse, and I'm not going to eat a pig, but I'll eat a turkey in a New York minute. So, and a goat, for sure, absolutely, and ducks. You can come over here and take advantage quickly, because if you don't, someone else will. This would be my first shopping list at about 2 a.m. And probably, in fact, I'd probably do it at about 3 a.m., 3 or 4 a.m., because that's when people, if there is any type of security, and you would probably want to check that out beforehand. You'd want to know that. But if that's when people, and when I was in the infantry, we always had stand to at about 5 a.m. because that's usually when people attack first. It's about the time, if you have an enemy who's switched on, if you have an enemy who's really switched on, they're going to attack at the times when you're the least amount of paying attention. And that's early morning and when it's raining. You always hear that phrase, if it ain't raining, it ain't training. That's why. Anyway, going back to our subdivision, take into account the things that are around you. Golf courses, just let me tell you, because I grew up next to one, are not great places to put any sort of crops or growing food items. These fields, these grasslands are forever contaminated by tons and tons and tons. Literally tons of chemicals. You would not believe the amount of chemicals that they put on greenery for golf courses to keep them the way they want them to be looking. So, don't think you're going to plant here. But if you have other places, yes. And some of these other lawns, listen, it doesn't matter how many times True Green Chem Lawn came out to your subdivision and put, stuff on your lawns. It's not even near the chemicals that are on a golf course. So just know that and understand that. So there's kind of my rundown on subdivisions, a better rundown. Hope you appreciate that more than the last one. Now, one thing I want to just kind of give you a heads up on, I am very critical at times with people who live in the desert. Because the reality is, and some of you people who live in the desert who've commented on my videos where I'm critical on people who live in the desert, you have been honest with me. Zach, when the water gets shut off, we are in deep trouble. Yes, you are. Okay, and here, if you don't believe that, here's what I want to tell you. Try to live without water this summer for a week. Okay, turn off your water, and whatever water catchment you got, that's what you have to take your baths, to drink, to water your animals, to water your gardens, everything on what you've got supply-wise, and see how long that will last. Because a week-long time will give you enough reading to understand if you have enough water until the next monsoon comes. And you usually know when those are going to show up. If they show up, hopefully they'll show up. Listen, a desert is a desert because it doesn't rain. And if you don't have enough water stored up, you're in big trouble. Now, I'm going to switch gears and attack a whole other set of you people. So hang on. Florida. For the most part, and I've mentioned this in passing in times at my channel, for the most part, you people in Florida are in just as big a trouble as the people in the desert. Okay, I've said before, and people have pushed back on me, but I'm going to hold my ground on this. The majority of people who live in most of Florida did not get there until after the 1950s. Why? Because the invention of air conditioners. Florida is not a livable place. It's not. Never has been. Okay? Do you understand? Now, in the 1920s, it got very popular because some presidents and some other people who were rich and well off discovered these amazing places on the coast of Florida where the wind comes in. It's a very nice place, great place to visit, and people came down there on the coast. But in the inland part, Florida is basically a paved over swamp. The most deadly creature of all on all of planet Earth lives in Florida. Do you know what that is? I'm not talking about the alligator. The most deadly creature on all of planet Earth lives in Florida, and that is the mosquito. Do you understand how much chemicals Walt Disney World pumps into the air in order to give everyone a nice experience? For Disney, it's all about guest experience. You will see that phrase everywhere in Disney. Guest experience. They put so many chemicals in the morning, early morning, and late evening into the air to keep the mosquitoes at bay. And the rest of the Florida does too. Florida on its own spends millions of dollars, taming the mosquito. And then you have all the private landowners who pay their own money out of pocket to take care of the mosquitoes in their areas. Subdivisions, homeowners associations, and even just private landowners. Guys, Daniel Boone once went down to Florida because Daniel Boone went everywhere. He went to all these states because if he moved to a place and someone moved 40 miles from him, he was like, oh no, that's way too many people. I got to get out of here. And so he moved to a new state. He moved to a new place. He was always trying to find somewhere where there was nobody living around. He wanted to be secluded and with his family and just live in the wilderness. He loved it. So one day he goes down to Florida. He wrote about this extensively. Back in the early homeschool days, we were reading about Daniel Boone. Jamie was doing all this research about Daniel Boone. He wrote about Florida. He went down there. He's like, well, the Seminole Indians are down there. I'll go check it out. And it's because if they live down there, I can live down there. He was like, oh, hell no. No. He basically said great place to visit, but not a good place to live. Why? Mosquitoes, malaria. You will die if everything goes kaput in Florida. If the electricity gets turned off and services, if we have a grid down situation, Florida is not the place to be. I'm sorry for raining on a bunch of parades. It has great rainwater. I mean, it gets lots of rain, but the soil is not good in my opinion. I have lived there for a number of years, went to college there. And the mosquito. So many people are going to die of malaria. If you homestead in Florida, if that's you, and I've just rained on your parade, I hope if you're still here and you haven't switched off the channel yet, prepare accordingly. You better have things. There are things you can get over-the-counter meds to treat malaria on your own. Amazing things that were not around 50 years ago. Okay, get some of those things, stock up on those things. That has to be your priority. And then the long-term priority would get out of Florida. If you're into preparedness, leave a comment below. Let me know what I think. I hope I've covered, because there's a lot of people who live down in Florida, and a lot of them lived in subdivisions. So I hope I'm covering the gamut of stuff today. Let me know what you think down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can tell me I'm crazy all you want. But again, if you have not read Daniel Boone and what he thought about Florida, you should go do that. Because if we lose the grid and we live in a life without rule of law again, it's just going to be like Daniel Boone with all the crazies, and the mosquitoes are going to have a field day. All right. We'll leave it at that. Love to hear your comments. All right, guys. See you next time at the Homestead. Bye. Alexander the Great. Did you know when he died, his body was placed in a coffin made of solid gold? Decades later, Ptolemy X and Cleopatra III stole the coffin and gold artifacts just so they could pay their war debts. Germany, at the time of World War II, stole all of the gold they could get their hands on, and much of it still today has not yet been accounted for. You see, all throughout history, when times get tough, people, either good or bad, seek real wealth. They turn to gold and silver. The central banks and Wall Street cheerleaders would have you believe that gold and silver are just shiny rocks with no real value. But did you know that central banks around the world have for the last year been buying record amounts of gold and silver for stockpiling? Stockpiling for what? What do they know that they're not telling us? Genesis Gold Group is a proud supporter of an American homestead. They help people get out of locked-in 401ks and IRAs into something that's real, physical gold and silver. If you're going to be locked into something, it might be a good idea to talk to Genesis Gold Group about being locked into something physically vaulted instead of just a piece of paper that at the end of the day is just that, a piece of paper. It's a clear surety that our economy is headed for turbulent waters. The nation is currently over $31 trillion in debt, and Congress keeps spending money and the Fed keeps printing it. That does not bode well for anyone keeping and saving money in savings accounts or paper-denominated assets. Call Genesis Gold Group today, this instant, or visit them online at genesisgoldgroup.com. They can put together a strategy that's right for you. And be sure to say that you heard about them from an American homestead.
Hey guys, did you know you can become a patron of an American homestead? They get access to private videos, and we send them gifts from the homestead that we make here on the homestead. And we also enter our patrons into special giveaways that are only available to them. And before you go, please check out these other great videos.